The wind moved like a restless spirit across the plain, lifting ribbons of dust into the dim light of dawn. Gideon Holt stood at the fence line, a silhouette cut against a sky the color of ash, his hands braced on worn cedar rails. The land stretched outward, dry and quiet, a vast canvas of silence broken only by the soft creak of what beneath his palms. He had stood in that same place countless mornings, watching the world wake in shades of gray and gold. Yet each day carried the same weight, the same hollow ache that never quite left his chest. The ranch was his inheritance, though he often wondered if it was more curse than blessing. Every board, every nail, every scar in the soil seemed bound to memory. His wife, buried beneath a small rise beyond the barn, lingered in those memories like a ghost. He had not spoken her name aloud in years, but the boy, Elias, wore her features in such plain defiance of time that Gideon could not escape the reminder. 10 years old, sharp-eyed and gentle-handed, Elias was the last proof that Gideon's life had once held laughter. Now it was duty and the slow ache of survival, the quiet grind of feeding cattle and patching roofs, the rituals of a man left half-finished. That morning the horizon shifted. Gideon narrowed his eyes against the rising sun, the brim of his hat shading him from the glare. A dark shape stood far off against the grassland, tall and strange, unmoving even as the wind pulled hard the grasses around it. His horse stamped the earth uneasily, sensing what he did not yet know. Gideon tightened the strap on his coat and mounted, the leather saddle groaning beneath his weight. He nudged the horse forward, the rhythm of hooves steadying him though his heart unsettled in his chest. The closer he came, the more the shape resolved into something unnatural, something brutal. His breath shortened. It was a wooden cross, roughly hewn, planted deep into the earth, and tied to it, arm splayed, head hanging forward, was a woman. Gideon's throat dried. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into dust. The air smelled of smoke and sweat, acrid and raw. The woman's dress was torn and filthy, her skin blistered beneath the merciless sun. But what froze him cold was the sight of her back, flesh charred in jagged strokes, the scar still fresh and red, letters carved into her skin. He staggered forward, the name blazing against her flesh like a brand meant for him alone. Elias Holt. The world tilted. Gideon's hands trembled as he reached for her bindings. Whoever had done this knew him, knew his boy, and meant this woman's torment as a message. His knife sliced through rope stiffened by blood and dirt. The woman collapsed into his arms, so light he feared she would vanish. She stirred faintly, lips cracked, voice no more than a broken whisper. "Don't leave me here." "You're safe," Gideon muttered, though the word felt fragile. He lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her to steady her failing frame, and turned back toward the ranch. His heart pounded with questions he dared not speak. By the time he carried her through his gate, Elias was already running from the porch, his small boots kicking up dust. The boy's eyes widened at the sight of her, confusion and fear flickering across his freckled face. "Pa!" "Water. Fetch water," Gideon ordered, his voice sharper than intended. Elias obeyed, sprinting toward the pump while Gideon lowered the woman onto a cot inside the barn. She groaned, turning her face away as though ashamed of the daylight. "What's her name?" Elias whispered when he returned, breathless. Gideon wet a cloth and pressed it gently to her lips. She drank in small, trembling sips. At last her eyes opened, gray as storm clouds, filled with both terror and defiance. "Clara May," she rasped. Gideon nodded, though the name meant nothing. "You're safe here," he repeated. She flinched at the word, as though safety was something foreign. He tucked the blanket over her shoulders and said no more. The hours that followed passed in taut silence. Clara May slept fitfully, haunted by fever. Gideon worked the fields with restless hands, but his mind returned always to the letters carved into her back. Elias hovered near her, curiosity at war with unease. Gideon told him nothing, for what words could shield a child from the knowledge that evil walked so close to their lives? When the sun dipped low, Gideon saddled his horse again. He rode into town, Clara May's weight heavy on his thoughts, and the whispers began before his boots even hit the dirt street. Folks leaned from porches, eyes sharp with judgment. "They say," he brought in some cursed woman. Burned. She was marked. A widower's gone mad, taking in strays like that. Gideon ignored them, jaw set like stone. He carried Clara May into the doctor's office, every step echoing in the hush of gossip that followed him. The doctor, a gray-bearded man named Harlan Finch, studied the wounds with quiet horror. She was meant to die out there, Finch muttered, stitching and bandaging with careful hands. But she didn't. That makes her dangerous to whoever left her. Gideon said nothing, only stood guard at the window while Clara May winced beneath the needle. The town's whispers pressed against the glass, relentless. She ought to be sent away, one woman hissed as Gideon left with Clara May supported against his arm. We've no need for cursed folk here. Back at the ranch, Clara May tried to hide the shame that weighed heavier than her wounds. She would not meet Gideon's gaze. Her back was a battlefield. A cruel message burned into her flesh, and every step reminded her of it. "I'll leave," she murmured one night, her voice thin as thread. "When I can walk farther than the barn door, I'll go. You've done enough." Gideon studied her across the lantern light, his hand still on the table, rough knuckles scarred by years of labor. "You won't make it 2 miles. I've endured worse." "Not with Elias's name on your back," he said quietly. Her eyes flicked up then, startled, as though she had forgotten he bore that same burden. "They wanted me to see you. That makes this my fight as much as yours." Something unspoken passed between them. Fear, gratitude, the fragile edge of trust. The days stretched. Clara May began to rise, her steps unsteady but determined. She helped Elias with small tasks, mending torn pages of his book, teaching him letters he had yet to master. The boy warmed to her quickly, sensing something in her spirit that mirrored his own need. Gideon watched from the doorway, the sight tugging at the iron chains around his heart. Yet danger pressed closer. Rumors of the Hollow Spurs, a gang he had crossed years ago, reached his ears in snatches of tavern talk. Men whispered of outlaws who marked their victims as warnings, who carved names into flesh to set fear into bone. Gideon remembered the night he had stood against them, rifle steady, the weight of justice heavy in his trigger finger. He had thought that past buried, but now it had clawed its way back in the form of Clara May's wounds. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Clara May stood at the edge of the field, her shawl drawn tightly around her. Gideon approached quietly, the soil soft beneath his boots. "You've been through hell," he said, not as question but truth. She looked at him, eyes reflecting the last light of day. "Hell leaves scars. Yours are just easier to hide." The words cut clean because they were true. Gideon said nothing more, only stood beside her as the wind carried the smell of rain. That night Elias pressed close to Clara May, leaving his toy horse on her blanket, without a word. She held it in her hand, the small wooden figure worn smooth from years of play, and tears slid silently down her cheeks. It was the first time Gideon saw her weep. He turned away, giving her the dignity of privacy, though the sight burrowed deep into him. And then came the night of fire. Gideon woke to the sound of hooves, and laughter carried through the dark. He rose from his bed, rifle in hand, and stepped onto the porch. Torches flickered beyond the gate. Men shouted, their voices sharp with mockery. They were building. Gideon's blood froze as he saw it. Another cross, hammered into the ground outside his ranch. Rough wood, tall against the night sky, its shadow stretching long across the field. The outlaws worked quick, their leader's voice carrying above the rest. "Halt," he bellowed. "You can't hide her. You can't hide the boy. We'll take what's owed, same as before." Clara May appeared in the doorway behind Gideon, her face pale in the torchlight. She did not retreat. She stepped forward, shawl slipping from her shoulders, scar back bare to the fire's glow. Her voice rang clear, strong despite its tremor. "You failed once. You'll fail again." The gang stilled. Her presence unsettled them, her survival a wound to their pride. Gideon lifted his rifle, steady hands betraying none of the storm within. Elias clung to Clara May's skirts, wide-eyed but silent. For a breathless moment, the night held. Then Gideon fired a single shot into the air, the crack echoing like thunder. The horses reared, the men cursed, and the hollow spurs drew back. unwilling to test the defiance that faced him. The torches dimmed as they rode off into the dark, but their vow lingered, heavy and certain. "We'll be back." The cross remained, stark against the night, a promise carved in wood. Clara May's eyes met Gideon's, and in that silent exchange, something shifted. Shame gave way to defiance. Loneliness bent beneath the weight of something unspoken, something new. And when Elias whispered, voice trembling, "Are they gone, Pa?" Gideon did not answer. He looked instead at the cross, at the scarred woman standing unbroken beside him, and knew this was only the beginning.